Hi everybody, this is a look at the Nikon FA, which was introduced in 1983 along with the FE2 and FM2N, and FA stands for Film Advanced, and it's basically Nikon's most advanced manual film camera they ever made. And I'm going to run over its features and controls and hopefully tell you something about it what you didn't know. So starting at the top plate, on the left hand side you've got the rewind crank and lever for tensioning and rewinding the film. Around that you have the ASA film speed dial, which you just basically lift up and you can turn that to various settings between 12 and 3200 ASA, and it's currently set on 400 ASA. To the right of that is the exposure compensation dial, which only works in centre weighted metering, which I'll tell you about later. But basically pressing the button and you can adjust it in third stops from up to +2 to -2 stops. On the top you've got the flash sync terminal, which is quite advanced on this camera. It does offer through the lens off the film flash metering, and it also shows a LED in the viewfinder when the flash is ready to be fired. Moving to the right you've got the shutter speed dial, and this camera is all electronic. It can only be used in 2 manual shutter speeds, and they are selectable on this dial. You have to turn the dial, pressing this button at the back, and then you can move it to M250, which is a manual firing mechanical 250ths of a second, or you can set it to B, where the shutter will remain open as long as you've got the finger on the button. To take it off those manual settings, you just turn it, you don't need to press the button in again, and then these settings are electronically controlled from 1 second all the way up to 4 thousandths of a second. The highlighted in red 250 is the maximum flash sync speed, which it defaults to. Here is the film plane. It shows you where the film is in the camera, if you're doing any measurements for macro working with bellows, etc. Here is the programmed, or I should say exposure mode settings, which is P for programmed, S shutter priority, A aperture priority, and M for manual, and that's adjusted via this little lever on the front here, and it shows you with the little mark there which one is selected. You've got the shutter button, which has a threaded centre for accepting a cable release or a soft shutter release button. But I will mention, when you've got the soft shutter button inserted, you can't use the mechanical shutter speeds, because the mechanical shutter speeds require the button to be pressed down a lot further, and you can't do that when the soft shutter release button is on. So that's something to be aware of. Here is the frame counter, which advances automatically one at a time, and it resets itself when you open the film back. You've got a multiple exposure lever, which is very simple to use on this one. Anytime when you want to take another exposure on the same shot, you just press that lever, move the film advance, and it cocks the shutter without advancing the film. Here's the advance lever, which serves as a couple of functions. In that position, the closed position, it actually locks the shutter button even if it's cocked. You've got a standoff position that unlocks the shutter button, and then also when you press the shutter button halfway, it gets the meter working. The film advance is a nice stroke on this camera, and it's very precise. Say a very short stroke, and it feels very nice. The only other camera I know that has a nicer stroke is the Nikon FA, which is quite strange. Looking at the back, you've got the serial number, You've got the eyepiece obviously through the viewfinder, and you do have an eyepiece cover, which is unusual because this is not classed as a professional camera, it's a semi-pro camera, but you can close the eyepiece cover via that little switch there. The film back opens by pressing in this little lever before pulling up the rewind crank, and then you can pull it and it opens up the back, clicks open. Looking inside, you've got that beautiful titanium honeycomb patterned shutter curtain, which at that time they needed because this camera can fire at shutter speed up to 1/4000th of a second. They had to produce a shutter curtain that was extremely light and also obviously very strong, so that's why they needed titanium. Later on their cameras they were able to produce the same effect, high shutter speeds, with a aluminium shutter, because obviously these shutter curtains were very, very expensive. Looking on the base, you've got a motor drive cover where the motor drive contacts make contact. You've got the battery cover. Say this is all electronic camera, you do need batteries for it to function, and it takes one 3-volt lithium battery or two SR44 which are alkaline, or two LR44 which I would recommend, which are silver oxide batteries. Got a tripod mount. You've got, when you get to the end of the film, a release button which releases the sprocket inside, so you can then rewind the film. And here again is the advance for the motor drive and the firing of the shutter with the motor drive, that little button there. Looking on the front, you've got a actual grip here which can be removed, and I will show you that simply removes by this little screw. You can move the hand grip as such, and it just feels nice actually with the grip, but you do need to remove that to fit the motor drive, which I'll show you in a minute, and that just slides off. Here you've got the self timer which operates with the shutter button. So basically you set the timer, and when you press the shutter it uses the self timer before firing the shot. Here's the depth of field preview lever, which actually pushes forward, not backwards. So you push it forward with your finger, but obviously when you're holding the camera it's actually, you're more likely to press it with your middle finger. It's got a nice action on that. Down here at the bottom, now the metering methods on this is it does work in multi-pattern mode automatically, which I say is like a matrix metering. So it takes account of the outer areas of the viewfinder, but you can use it in center-weighted mode. If you just want to take an odd shot or two like that, if you press in this button on the side here, it works in center-weighted mode, but it also has a lock feature, so you can press it in and twist it slightly, so you can see the red mark on the top, and then that is locked in center-weighted, and you can just release it again like that. On the right side here you've got a PC sync socket for attaching an external flash, and you've got the lens mount release. Now I'm going to show you the mount on this camera, because as I say it is the most advanced manual focus camera they ever made, and it's one of the few that can use manual focus lenses in programmed and shutter priority mode, and it does that by some extra little features, and I might need another little light to show you this actually. So it's going to be difficult for me to show you all this, but I'll do my best. So first of all, you've got a little pin here. I'll show you that. It's here, and that pin recognises if the lens is a AIS lens or not. And the way that works is, if the pin drops forward, then it means it's dropping in the groove on the lens, which is here. And if it drops into that groove, it knows it's an AIS lens, because AI lenses, which were introduced in 1977, don't have that groove. This came out in 1981, that feature. And you may ask, well, what is the reason for that? And that's basically so it knows how to control the aperture control here on the lens, because apparently AIS lenses have a different travel of the aperture blades to AI lenses. So the camera needs to know which one it is to make sure that in the program and shutter priority mode it controls the aperture correctly, because the camera then is setting the aperture, not you. So it needs to know it's an AI or AIS lens. All the features in here, which again I say are not unique to this camera. The F4's got it, the the F501, F301, I believe the FG as well. There is a lever in the bottom. So it's difficult for me to do all this in one go. I'll try my best. There's a lever here in the bottom, this one, which moves across on a spring, and basically what that does is it is controlled by this little lever on the lens. That's fixed obviously, but that is different sizes depending on the lens maximum aperture. So obviously a smaller maximum aperture, that is bigger, and what happens is when you put on the lens and it turns on the mount, it presses that lever in, and that's again so the camera knows what is the maximum aperture at all times and lets it work in programmed and shutter priority mode. The other little lever inside the lens mount is this one here on this side, and basically that's a little, it presses in like a little button that presses in. You can see it pressing in with my thumb, and that is for lenses that are 135mm focal length or higher, have another ridge on the lens, and that pushes that lever in. And what that is for is so in program mode it can use a high speed program, because it's got two settings on the program mode, a normal and a high speed setting. And so obviously for lenses of 135mm or more, it uses the high speed setting to give you a higher shutter speed, so trying to make it obviously so you don't get so much camera blare with movement, etc. So again, that's quite advanced. You've also got obviously the standard aperture indexing lever, which is here, which makes contact with the indexing ridge on the lens, because this camera can use AI, AIS, Series E lenses, which are basically AIS lenses without the rabbit ears. It can also use AI modified lenses. That's had a new aperture ring put on, that's AI. You can also use AFD lenses, which are basically AIS lenses but with autofocus features. And as I say, you do need the lens to have a aperture ring. Obviously it can't work with this camera. So going to the exposure modes, you've got manual, and in manual mode the camera always works in centre weighted measuring. You can't use multi-pattern measuring for that. What you see is in the viewfinder, because the viewfinder does vary depending on the exposure mode you choose, you see the ADR window, which is basically a little window that shows this little number on the ring through to the viewfinder. So you see the aperture you've set, you see the shutter speed on the top left that you've set on the shutter dial, and with that it shows a plus or a minus symbol, so you can get the exposure. If the plus and minus symbol are both on, it shows the exposure is deemed to be correct. If you set it to the mechanical settings of M250 or B, you don't get any metering. So that's one thing to bear in mind for that. Next mode is aperture priority. So you just flick it to A, and then you set the desired aperture you want on the lens, and the camera automatically sets steplessly the shutter speed. And what you see in that mode is it's shown, the ADR window shows the aperture you've set as before in manual mode, and the LCD shows the shutter speed. You can also get high or low warnings on the LCD display to show that the camera can't set a shutter speed according to what aperture you've set, so you may need to adjust it accordingly. The next mode is a type of program mode, which is shutter priority. You set the aperture to minimum on the lens, and the camera can then adjust the aperture. And I say this is one of the few cameras that has that feature. The F4 does have it as well. It's a very unique feature of mine. Nikon DF can't do that. You can't use program mode with manual focus lenses on the DF, whereas this one you can. So in shutter priority mode, the shutter speed set shows in a window that actually opens up on the viewfinder, and you see that in the top right hand, so it actually shows the shutter speed you've set on the dial, and the LCD shows the f-stop that the camera is set in, so it shows an F and then the number. The ADR window itself is closed because obviously the lens is set on the minimum aperture, and the f-stop shown in the top left hand corner. If the exposure can't be obtained at the set shutter speed, then the LCD shows another shutter speed that the camera is setting for you. So that's a very clever feature, so you basically can't make an incorrect exposure. The other setting, which is for when you give the camera to your wife or your kids to take a picture, is P for program mode. And again, you set the aperture to the minimum. You can set the shutter speed dial to any setting except the M250 or B for bulb setting. And what you see then is the ADR window is shut, and you see the shutter speed that the camera is setting in the top left hand corner. If you can't get the correct exposure, you may see a high or low in the display to show you're going to get over or under exposure. And another display you might get is FEE, that shows the aperture is not set at the minimum setting. You do need it in center weighted mode to use the exposure compensation dial. Now the flash metering, by the way, as I mentioned, is through the lens. It's also off the film, and it uses a SPD cell that's in the base of the camera. See if I can show you that with this light. So you can see there's in the centre here, there's a little hole, and that's a cell that's pointing back to the film plane, and it measures the light reflected off the film and shuts off the flash accordingly. And that's brilliant for indoor flash. It's exactly what you need. Obviously, one thing it doesn't offer is balanced flash. Like new digital Nikon cameras can give you balanced fill-in flash, etc. You can't get that feature with this method, but what you can do is you could set it in aperture priority mode, set the shutter speed to 250 and set an aperture, and what you'd do is outside, say if you have some backlight, or you've got somebody under some shade or in under trees, etc., you can measure the scene of the exposure using aperture priority mode, and then put the flash on and make sure the aperture is set with the shutter speed for that same setting. It will then balance the flash. You like manually balance the flash yourself. That's something you can do. I'm going to show you now. First of all, I'll show you the box which comes with this camera, which look like that. You had an instruction manual inside with also Nikon lens sheet, etc. That came with that. Now I'm going to show you the motor drive, which is specifically for this camera. You can get a MD15. Now you can also fit an MD12, which works on this camera as well as the FM2 and the FE2, but this one gives you a higher frame rate. On the MD12 I think it's about 2.2, 2.5 frames per second. On this one you can get up to 3.2 frames per second, so it's a faster speed drive. And also fitting this drive to the FA, which is dedicated to it, you don't actually need any batteries in the camera itself. The camera is powered by this motor drive, whereas with an MD12 it's not. You would still require batteries in the camera. So it's just a bit more advanced for this particular camera. So to fix it, first of all you have to remove the grip, which I've already done. Then you need to undo the motor drive cover, which is this little one on the end, and that comes off, and you've got a nice little feature on the motor drive that you've got a little hole in there, a little thread, and you can keep the cover safe in there. Unfortunately, what they didn't think of was keeping the grip safe, and you do find quite a few of these FAs with the grip missing because people have took them off and mislaid them, or they've got broken, etc. That just screws nicely into there. To fit the grip, the drive, make sure it's in the lock position, and then get your camera. And the good thing about the FA, not like the F3, you can actually fit the motor drive with film loaded. So just connect it to the bottom, screw it on. Another thing to mention is you should have the film advance lever in the standoff position. So you can screw the drive on, and the drive itself does have a battery check feature. Just pressing this button, and if the light lights up, it's sufficient to power the drive and the camera. And to operate the drive, flick it into the little button here, press that in, move it to S, and then he says, "Is it working?" he says. Batteries are okay. I didn't show you where the batteries went actually. The batteries go in this little cover here, which has a nice little lever. I think I've had problems with this drive before actually. It takes 8 AA batteries. I've had problems with this drive not working before. I don't know if there's a contact problem or not. There may be. I don't think it's going to be working. Doesn't seem to want to work at the moment. Let's try again. Into continuous. Ah. Is it working? I think there's an intermittent fault on this drive actually. I don't know if it's something to do with the contacts. But it's not working for me. Sorry about that. I can't show you the drive working. But it basically, you press that button. You can also use the shutter button on the camera if you wish, but you've got S for single fire mode or C for continuous. If you fit this little button in the side here, where it says in the instruction manual at MR2, but this is at MR3, and this gives you another shutter button then on the side, so you can use it better in vertical mode. But when you use that button you don't get any display in the viewfinder. So I'm sorry I can't show the drive working, it's playing up on me at the moment, even though it's showing that the batteries are okay. To rewind at the end, if you've got the motor drive, you just flick up the that button there which operates the release button on the camera, and then you can rewind the film manually. It doesn't rewind it with the drive. Just another thing to mention, actually, these cameras are very good cameras. I would say actually better than the FM2, but the FM2 always seems more popular. The FA will sell for less than an FM2 of similar condition and year, which is strange actually, because this camera is a lot more advanced. I think a lot of people go for the FM2 because it's a mechanical camera. But just to show you when these were new, this is a trade price list from April 1985. And so this camera came out in 83, and it's quite surprising actually if you look at the price of the FA, let's say in black. Black always seemed to cost more money. I think it was £17 more. Obviously these are UK pound prices. The Nikon FA in black suggested retail price was £457. This is in 1985. The FM2 black was £290, so it's quite a difference. Just shows you how much more expensive this camera was. To put it into perspective, an F3 HP was £627. Things to look out for are, if you buy one of these second hand, obviously they're going to be used in a used market, is what I do is look at the eyepiece cover, because this is a rubber covering, and if it's the camera's had a lot of use, either this will be missing altogether, and again that's something to be wary of, or it will be badly worn. So if you look for one this is in really good condition, then you know it's not been used as much or been used better. Another thing is the lettering. Actually, I've noticed the lettering on the FA and also the serial number. Go for one that it looks very, very nice and sharp and white rather than yellowish, which obviously shows discolouring. So that's something to look out for. Hope you've enjoyed this look at the Nikon FA. It's a great camera, and you will find you will get excellent results from it. It's really that good. You get, because of the matrix metering, exposure wise it's can be a lot easier and better to get the right results. Hope to catch you another time with another review soon. I know I haven't done one for a long while. Sorry I couldn't show you the motor drive working. I'll try and get that sourced and maybe do another little video to show you that on its own. Thanks for watching again, and hope to catch you soon.